All right, I'd start off by saying you could say dot. That a dot's like a 0 point would be something like a one dimension. A dot to another dot would be something like a two dimension. And then that line would give you geometry, and that essentially would be symmetry. It would have cohesion. It would exist if you like, and I guess essentially what you're implying is that you can send as many amount of dots wherever you want to put them, so long as they're on that two-dimensional plane with that line, and you can have any type of symmetry. It'll still be stable. It's just in terms of when you get circular motion, and so that would give you your geometry. But when you, I suppose, even your algebra equations, because if you think of circles and pi, infinite amount of degrees that a circle can, that the diameter of or that the radius of a circle can exist on, because a circle can expand, whereas a three-dimensional square, if it expands, its dimensions stay the same, even though it's three-dimensional. Even though it's three dimensions, it has cohesion, it has stability and all that, but it's just not going to do anything different. It's not going to, I guess essentially when you're thinking of it invariantly, because that's already what the three-dimensional surface is giving you. So that's why all these atheists, I would argue, are still going to play around with heaven as long as they can, and they're still going to play around with there's some type of ceiling that there's some type of metallic ethereal ceiling that we can still surpass. Or then they always talk about thermodynamics when they want to make these thermodynamic laws aren't as they don't have any potency and things like that. In terms of evolution, if you look at the orbital of planets and how they're elliptical or oval, you look at how the rotation, they're all going the same direction, they're rotating, they could be rotating in the same direction, all the planets in the solar system, yet you have our moon is essentially rotating around our planet the complete opposite direction. It's spinning the opposite direction, and it's orbiting the opposite direction. Now that product basically makes everything else null. It doesn't change. It doesn't give you any value to gravity. It doesn't change anything about evolution. It doesn't give you any product or reason why our solar system could be upside down or whatever, especially when you're looking at other galaxies. So, all things considered, though, here I'm just talking about basically the symmetry, which is existential in the algebra. Well, I should say the geometry that we think of, or the certain concepts, or this isn't really like, this is sort of a made up problem just to prove that calculations are never going to be fully accurate, and therefore your going to be stuck with sort of a pi infinite problem, or they're never going to be able to prove. They're never going to be able to prove sentience. Like they're never going to be able to prove our neural capacity to feel pain. So this also has to do with like a neural net, and that's basically just your safety net. Like in terms of the internet, the economy collapses, and you have to prioritize things. Well, you could use a factoral. Essentially, if you were looking for specific numbers. So I would say this is completely, it just makes it obvious that using factorals with numbers works, but using factorals with symbology, like in this instance, I'm just using the sort of the it sort of looks like an A. I'm just using the the frequencies. So I'm saying the wavelength equals infinity. The wavelength doesn't equal infinity, then it equals the frequency in terms of the time warp continuum, or the time-space continuum. If you actually have a accurate measurement on, if you actually have geometry, if you actually have symmetry in the universe. Again, right away, you can't, because if you, even if you had a 1, even like, because if you use a number like 1, which is like whole, and you do 1 to the first power, then it's 1, and you do 1 to the second power, and it's 2, and you need your factorals to actually have a pattern as well. So you can see there's this pattern, and 1 minus x. You're trying basically to get n, and n is the component of like your best number. So again, this is calculations. This is calculating proximities in the universe, while they're going to be approximate, because they're not going to be 100% accurate. And so this is the problem, because this turns the universe into it actually does quite literally give it a fourth dimension, because if you have sort of a net infinity in the like if you live in a net infinite place, then you cannot contrive anything such as a concept, like a concept such as pain, or a concept such as horniness, or a concept such as inebriated. Like you in a fourth dimensional plane of existence, you can't you can't accurately do that. You can only calculate those things. So I'm just saying, because you're not gonna be able to get accurate. I'm just saying, like, my whole point is if you fill it out with 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, then you can do an accurate factorial, and you can actually follow the law of this calculation. But if you use symbology like radiation or frequency, you could even say, well, I want to calculate the end of. I want to calculate, if you wanted to calculate the end of time, the end of the universe. See, that would not compute in calculation, because there can be no negative derivative. You're looking for a number here. You're not looking for something that is. You could even, even if you, because if you gave concepts numbers, and you plugged in the accurate formula, and you gave death a number and life you gave you said well, this, that, and the other, like it would already be calculated for you because it's a law. You can plug in different numbers that you derive from other experiments, but if you already have an experiment that you want to know something about in its totality, then it's going to be rigged. So it's going to be completely rigged because you don't get the correct exponents. You get you're supposed to get factorial 1, factorial 2, or factorial to the power of 1, factorial to the power of 2, factorial to the power of 3, etc., etc. And you're factoring out negative exponents, so this is teaching you about polarity, and then you're also because you're factoring out negatives, and you're giving your negative value, and then you're giving it negative power, and that's giving it positive value, and you continue to go through the equation, and eventually you see a pattern, and then you're back to your factorial of your number, not necessarily your symbolic definition of something, and you understand I have the best possible answer for, you're doing n plus 1 and 1 minus x, and you basically it always uses plus 2 because you need to get back to the first exponent that gave this equation any value, which was -2. But right away, when you do 1 multiplied by the frequency, you just get frequency squared, whereas you're supposed to just get 1 again, and then you're supposed to get so 1 goes into your next bracket, and then you would have 1 times 2, and that would be 2, and then you'd have 2 times 3, and that would be 6, and then you would have 6 times 4, and that would be 24, and then you would have 5 times 24, and that would be 120. So I already did that problem, and that's how I was getting this out of the equation. So I thought, like, well, what if I add a symbolic definition, like to try to figure out something in the universe, and it doesn't work because it's non-linear, it's asymmetrical to derive any type of factual agreement with the universe in terms of having a real empirical three-dimensional experience. You can only actually process anything. I would say this is a serious thing that people should understand. This is why there's a serious disassociation with everything in the universe, because we can't accurately calculate anything, and we're constantly trying to calculate different things, or we're prioritizing, or even trying to have our neural net. What do I if I don't have electricity, then what book am I going to read? Or if I don't have my book, then what pen or notebook am I going to use? And if I don't have that, then what am I going to think about to pass the time? Something like that is doesn't compute with calculating. It's not accurately I'm not accurately calculating anything like that, I'd say, through my own volition or through my own free will, because there's never going to be the n. It's never going to be anything to the nth degree, because there's never going to be a best answer, because there's always going to be some other answer. There's always going to be another derivative, and this is playing with fire. And yeah, so there's no, you wanted to find a different, like I said, you go from 1 to 120, and your factorials are supposed to match with the equation. So it's supposed to be factorial of 2 equals 2, factorial of 3 equals 3, and yeah, and then you have your best possible answer, and and then you multiply that by 0, and you get your best possible answer plus 1 multiplied by your factorial, and that's just part of the law. But again, you can't get the best possible answer because it has to be the pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So this is like the most basic calculus. In terms of calculus, is just looking for patterns, and you're looking for nonlinear asymmetrical like derivations in physics to try to assemble like a coherent, the coherency and stuff, and then understanding that there isn't really any coherency in the infinite universe. So I would never be a proponent of simulation theory, but in terms of in terms of this being a real empirical life that is actually happening, and what you do matters and has drawbacks and affects people. It's a real experience, but the fact of the matter is that what's going on psychologically has no intrinsic value. It has, on paper, it has no value. It really doesn't. So it is a mockery, because this is the science, and yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that, but that's calculus. So I'd imagine you can have guesstimations with statistics and everything, but that'll just get into another, dive into some other portal to, living with a bunch of fucking cannibals, I guess, man. Anyway, so I don't really have anything other than that. Like I said, this was I put this down on paper. I had I did the problem before. I mean, this isn't even the full problem, but I just already understood that it wasn't working, so. Yeah, the fourth dimension. Again, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist theoretically, or it doesn't exist logically or rationally. You can't plug in emotions. You can't plug in anything. You can't plug in anything that is conceptual, like pain or suffering or anything like that. And that fourth dimension lives linearly. It lives asymmetrically. Whereas on the three-dimensional plane, where you're having an experience when you try to grab, and that's linear and symmetrical. Remember that linearization. I think it is called perturbation. I think it is perturbation theory. This idea that you're deriving things dimensionally, and you can't process anything that is not infinite because you're only in your own little world and all that. Again, the geometry doesn't compute with evolution, because there's no factual evidence in terms of gravity, like which way we're actually facing in the universe. You can't come up with anything linear or symmetrical, and so you can only pull I'd say nonlinear and asymmetrical concepts basically out of your own ass or through the math, and that is that in turn makes everything deterministic. So it's a real idea that this universe and where you are and how you're feeling, you're not going to die. And that could be like your evolutionary flight, protection or whatever. And yeah, it's kind of, I don't know if I explained that well enough. So I'm just gonna keep going. So yeah, anyway, yeah, factorials. Yeah, that's about it.